VBB Hot Seat time. Today we are with one of the best leaders of all time, Tim Caldwell, where we get to know the real deal Holyfield of the people who are in our network. You know the deal. 5 questions, 3 personal, 2 professional. The man, myth, legend, Tim Caldwell, you are on the VBB Hot Seat.
Thank you, Joe. Looking forward to it. Really excited to be here.
Rock on, my man. Well, let's get right into it. You as a leader, right? So who's the best manager that you've ever had in your career?
So it's interesting. When I think about this, there are 2 that really stand out to me. The first one is Jay Benson. Jay Benson, the site head for me once as a head of operational excellence, head of facilities. Jay Benson was one of those leaders that he wasn't the flashiest, but he had a quiet competence, and he was consistent about pushing for more. He wanted to always understand, how could you be better? How could the site be better? How could we do more things with what we have? How could we always look for better? And he wasn't a showman. He wasn't all about making it political. He was about asking for improvement, always asking for how can you do it better. I'd say the other manager that stands out to me is my current manager, Matt Payne. Matt Payne has really been not just a good leader and a good manager, but a good friend. And one of the things that I admire most about Matt, and what I call out, is his focus on behavior, his focus on good leadership behaviors, even when times are tough. He really is focused on how do you show up? How do you show up as a leader? How do you bring yourself in every interaction, whether it's one-to-one, whether it's one-to-many, whether it's in face-to-face or virtual? How do you focus on your behavior and how your behavior makes the other person better? He's really good at encouraging and contextualizing success. It's something that he really focuses on is the idea that recognize it, but put it in the context of how does that help you, and how does it help you? What did you learn from it? How do you look to the future, and how do you then incorporate what you've learned into becoming a better leader? So in both cases, I'd say the best thing about the best leaders I've been a part of is they're pushing me to be a better leader. They're pushing me to look at, how can I continually improve what I'm doing and ask others to do the same?
If you look at leadership, what are those key attributes of a leader?
I'm a big fan of the rule of 3 to 5, and that's something that I consistently tell my people, or people that I work with, that the human mind can't really work with much more than 3 to 5 things at a time. So I'm a big fan of that rule. So I'm looking at 3 to 5. There are 3 things that really stand out to me, and the first is humility. The first is the recognition that you don't know everything. That my job is not to be command and control. My job is not to be the smartest person in the room. My job is to get the smartest people to solve the biggest problems. That requires humility. That requires understanding that I'm not going to solve the problem by myself. And not only that, but I can't think of myself better than someone else. These are people. We interact with people. Relationships are what it's all about. So how do we develop that relationship? It's having that attitude of humility. The second one is vision. Without vision, the people perish. And the idea that if you can't look toward a future state, if you can't look toward what is it that you're trying to accomplish, it's difficult to explain why you would move from where you are today to take step 1 toward accomplishment of that vision. So you have to be able to paint a picture of that and be able to say, this is where we're going. Part and parcel of that is the third attribute, is persistence. That, it comes back to some of the John Cotter work with, over communicate by a factor of 10 in terms of leading change. And you think about persistence, that means that you have to constantly be giving the message. I worked at Quest Diagnostics for a number of years, and the CEO there, Ken Freeman, was was very interesting. He was a self-avowed terrible public speaker. He wasn't necessarily the flashiest guy, but what you learned about Ken Freeman is every time you had contact with him, he brought up one or all 3 of the most important things that he believed were critical to the vision of Quest Diagnostics. And he was consistent with every person he met with, whether it was at the shop floor level, whether it was his direct reports, whether it was the board of directors. He was sharing one or more of the 3 things that he felt was most important. As a result, people thought he was a great leader. People said, Ken really understands how to drive a vision. And it was persistence. So the ability to have that vision is great, but if you can't persistently ask and insist on achievement of it, not through bullying people, not through command and control, but saying, how do we do this together? How could we achieve this? How can we constantly look for it? That persistence is also what people recognize as what you hold important. We're constantly being looked at in every situation as to how to act and react in a business environment. And if we're consistent and persistent in how we express that, people begin to realize, well, they're serious. That's really what he means.
What are the key ways to really keep your best people then?
Something I say to my people all the time, say to the people that I work with, if you're doing really well, I'll tell you right away. If you're not doing well, I'll tell you right away. The idea that encouragement and guidance isn't waiting for a mid-year or an annual review. Encouragement and guidance is constant. Number one, it's how do you constantly maintain that contact with your people so that they understand how they're doing, that you're providing that direction, that you're providing, this is great. Have you thought about this? This is great. How are you going to bring this forward and actually execute this? The idea that guidance at this level is so much more important than direction. You're not talking about telling them what to do. You're providing guidance to help them in their career, to help them in their ability as a leader. The second aspect that comes right along with that is challenge. How do you develop them personally, professionally? Create the challenging, create the situations where they don't necessarily have all the expertise, or they're not necessarily clear on the right steps to take. People have to understand, and people have to flex their own problem-solving capability to think about, how do I move in the next direction? How does this benefit me? How does this benefit the organization? How do I look at the relationships that I've built and be able to solve this problem? I might not even be able to do it myself. I might have to bring in more people. So challenging people, giving them opportunities to succeed, giving them opportunities to stretch and to grow. The last one, and probably the most important, is empathy. Show them you care. Paying attention goes a long, long way. The ability not just to hear, not just compassion, but empathy. Compassion is feeling something the way people feel. Empathy is understanding why they feel the way they do. And that's really the key here, which is understanding, working with people and thinking about them as human beings. As I mentioned many times, it's relationships. It's about relationships. So cultivating those and understanding how you contribute to those and asking, I understand that you had a situation last night. Is it any better? Is there anything I can do to help? Asking it's the little things. It's paying attention that goes a long way.
So, Tim, if you had to have an entrance song, one song to introduce Tim Caldwell, what would it be?
My mother is a huge fan of the movie The Sound of Music. And every time I think about an entrance song, I think about Maria spinning on the hilltop to The Hills Are Alive to The Sound of Music. That is such a non-typical entrance song, and that's not what I would say. But every time someone asks me that, I always think of my mother starts crying every time she sees Maria singing on The Hills Are Alive, which is really kind of funny. So I just had to mention that. But my entrance song, Right Here, Right Now.
Right here, right now.
All right. First concert of all time.
You know what's funny is I grew up in Central Maine. So I grew up, you take a map of Maine and you put your finger what you think is the middle. That's where I grew up. We didn't have a lot of access to concerts back then, believe it or not. And we spend a lot of time, doing what high school kids do in Central Maine. So my first real concert wasn't until I went to college. I went to school in Worcester Polytech in Worcester, Mass. And I saw the Beastie Boys at the Worcester Centrum. And I remember our seats were as far up as you could possibly get. Literally, it was at the top of the row. If I looked down, I was going to fall down about 50 feet of staircases at like a 45-degree angle. It was a great show. But I spent the entire time basically looking up and looking down to make sure I wasn't going to trip and go down.
Dude, you were at the Beastie Boys.
Oh, it was awesome. Yep. It was I think it was Paul's Boutique was the album that was out at the time. It was fantastic. It was great.
What a great first concert of all time, man.
It was pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, Tim Caldwell, thank you. You are off the VBB Hot Seat.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Just like a box.